So we're up to on page 11a, Yud Aleph, Amar Aleph, and we're continuing with the drushes the way they started when they started expounding on the Megilah. So the very first pasuk of the Megilah, this is the very first pasuk of Megilah. It looks like from the next Rashi, it looks like this is also the way they begin to expound. This is like part, but then it goes away from here on just to explain the Megilah. So, yeah, I was just wondering if you're coming on. I was going to wait for you. Same link from last week, yeah. Okay, no problem. So it says, "Vayhi b'mei Achashverosh," and it was in the day of Achashverosh. So we already had before that Vayihi is a language of trouble. Remember, we learned before. It says Ein Vayihi, and then the Gemara it says no, Vayihi b'mei. But here Rav continues to say that Vayihi is Vai Vihi. It's like whoa, like a double Vai, woe and woe. Vai Vihi. So he says, what is this double? What is this double cry out? So he says like this. Adodik Siv, this is what the pasuk says in Devarim Chav Ches Samaches. Over there, the pasuk is talking about the toichacha, the rebuke, and the pasuk says over there, "V'yismakartem shom le'oivecha la'avodim v'lishvachos v'goymer." He says you will be sold over there to your enemies as maidservants, male servants, and maidservants, etc. But the verse continues there and says, and there will be no buyers. So nobody will want to even buy you. That's part of the toichacha. So this is sort of like a double negative. And at least I guess if they bought him, maybe they would provide them with food or whatever. They'll be settled. They're selling them. So in the verse, it says, "V'ismakartem shom," in exile, you'll be sold there, lo'ivecha, to your enemies. And it says, la'avodim v'lishvachos v'goymer. Over there, the verse says, "Ve'ein koina oisa. Ve'shivcha Hashem Mitzrayim ba'oniyas b'derech, sheramarti lo'isoisif oid l'roisa, v'ismakartem shom lo'ivecha la'avodim v'lishvachos ve'ein koina." You'll be sold there for servants and maidservants, and nobody's going to be buying. So this happened in the time of Haman. Haman made a decree that nobody's allowed to buy any slaves from the Jewish people. Again, apparently that's a further problem. He says like this. This that the Torah writes, that you'll be sold for avod mishvachas, and there's no buyers. Because Haman decreed that nobody has a right to purchase from them, that is from the Jewish people. You can't purchase from them a slave. So that is what Rav said. Now Shmuel says, he started with this one, Mehocha, Pischa. That's where he started. So it's a little bit confusing over here, because Vahibi Me'achashverosh seems like, as we'll see, the Gemara is giving drushes now by the order of the pasuk. Up till the Vahibi Me'achashverosh, the pasuk was giving you Rava Pascha Pischa. That was just like introduction. It had nothing to do directly with the Megilah. It talked about, there was an allusion to the Megilah, but here it looks like Vahibi Me'achashverosh, that this has to do with the Megillah. But by Shmuel is not contradicting it. So Rashi therefore says Shmuel Malcha Pischa. That's where he opened up when he started to drush. See, he goes back, and I'm not sure why the Gemara puts in Shmuel Omar after Rab over here, because after Shmuel we're going back to translate the Megillah. So Shmuel almost seems would fit in before we did Vahim Mechashverish, but that's not the way it's in the Gemara. In any event, he quotes the pasuk in Vayikra in Perik Vav, pasuk Mem Daled. Over there, the Torah also, we have 2 times in the Torah in which the Torah gives out the rebuke. 2 times. One in the portion of the Devarim, the Parshas Kisavai, and one in the portion in Vayikra, in the Parshas B'chukoisai. So over there, the Torah gives the rebuke. So over there, at the end, by the rebuke, the Torah says over there, Loi ma'astim v'loi ga'altim l'chaloisom. The full verse reads like this: Va'af gam zois, although v'yoisom be'eretz Eveim, while they're in the lands of their enemies, meaning while the Yidden are in the land of their enemies, be'eretz Eveim, Hashem says still, Loi ma'astim, I have not rejected them. I have not been disgusted with them. I also v'lo ga'altim, and I didn't go'el nefesh. I didn't discuss them l'chaloisom, to destroy them. There's 3 languages here: not me'astim, and not ga'altim, and not l'chaloisom, and then further lahofer brisi itom, to take apart my covenant with them. Even though they're in the land, even though they're in exile, still Hashem says, Lo ma'astim, lo ga'altim, l'chaloisom, lo brisitom, because I am God, their God. What is this talking about? So the Gemara says this goes on specific times. Shmuel started off with this pasuk. He says, Lo ma'astim, lo ga'altim, l'chaloisom. Lo ma'astim is when b'yimei yivonim, in the times of the Greek. Now, in the Gemara, the order over here, and there's different versions over here. I'm not going to get involved in the commentaries, little different versions. But basically, the Greeks, we know in the story of Hanukkah, as we say, that Amdu, the Yevonim, we call them the Greeks. But to very, very specific, so in the letter of the Rebbe, it was the Syrians. The Syrians, the Greek was a general. They ruled over various populations. But we call that, generally it's known also that there were 4 exiles. Exactly whether the 4th one, whether we're now the Galus. So these all correspond, but I'm not going to get involved because there's different versions over here. But Greeks normally is associated with the miracle of Hanukkah, with the Greeks. Yevonim omdu alai, those are the Greeks. Lo ga'altim, I am not. So Hashem says He hasn't rejected us in the days of the Greek, and we celebrate the miracle of Hanukkah. Same thing is v'lo ga'altim, but it would be out of order. So that's why it's also not so clear. V'lo ga'altim, that is talking about b'mei Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar is the one that destroyed the first Beis Hamikdash, and that also, that came before the Yevonim. Why switch the order? So that's where the versions come in here. L'chaloisom. So that talks already by the story of Haman, in the days of Haman, and then lahofer brisi itom, that I did not remove my covenant, that we made Parsim in the Persians. Now, the Persians is also the Haman, and the Persians is almost the same thing because Shushan Habira was in Persia, right? So there was also a different aspect of it. Before Haman came about, and the day of Persia. So it needs to be, we'll get into specifics to see exactly where it fits and the order. Further, it says, Ki ani Hashem Elokeim, I'm God, their God. This is referencing the May Gog and Magog, the day of Gog and Magog. Gog and Magog talks about the war before Mashiach is coming. We read in the Navi, there'll be great wars, there'll be a lot of sufferings, the Jews will suffer a lot, and a lot of the Yidden will, a third, just of the Jewish population. Many people attribute this Second World War and the annihilation of a third of our people, 6 million, as the war of Gog and Magog. But whatever the case is, Hashem at the end of the day says, Ani Hashem Elokeim, I'm God, their God, which means that notwithstanding all of the tsuris, notwithstanding all of we celebrate the miracles and the existence, Am Yisrael Chai, of the Jewish people. There's another little version over here. Again, why this and why this times, why this exactly? Especially now we're going to have a little bit of a different version that needs to be addressed separately. Masnisa Tono, in the Brisa, we learn to explain how Hashem actually protected us during all this time. So that is in a Brisa. It says how Hashem protected us. So the verse starts off with Loi Ma'astim, which says Bimei Yivonim. But he says that Loi Ma'astim is in the days of the Kasdim. The Kasdim, that's in the Navi of Daniel, Shemadati Lahem Daniel, Hananya, Mishael, Azariah. Those were the prophets which Hashem stood up for them in that time. That is the Loi Ma'astim. How did Hashem not reject them? By placing for them Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So that's the Loi Ma'astim. And then we have V'lo Ga'altim. So he translates here Bimei Yivonim. You see, before he said Loi Ma'astim Bimei Yivonim. Over here he says Lo Ga'altim Bimei Yivonim. Again, why does he change it around? I don't know. Shemadati Lohem Shimon HaTzadik. I had stood up for them, Shimon the righteous, and this was already the miracle of Hanukkah took place during the second temple, during the second Beit HaMikdash. The miracle of Purim took place in between the first and second Beit HaMikdash. The miracle of Hanukkah was in the middle of the second Beit HaMikdash. And that was already in the beginning of the era of the Tanoim, like we learn in the Mishnah. Shimon HaTzadik Hoyom Mishiore Knesset HaGdolah. So I guess he was left over, and he was ready from that period after Hanukkah. But you also have Chashmonai Ubonov. They also came into play. Chashmonai, which of course that's the one who created the miracle of Hanukkah, was Matisyahu and his 5 sons. Okay, that were able to chase out the Misyavanim, the Greeks, and the ones that were defiling. And further, so Umatisyo Kohen Gadol. Not sure, it seems almost repetitive. Again, what is Chashmonai? Gotta look this up. I mean, it's a guy that I gotta look it up and see. Chashmonai, I thought would be Matisyo, because he is the Chashmonai. And then it says Ubonov, whose sons, his sons. Seems like it's a referencing to Matisyo, Ubonov, the sons of Matisyo. But then he says Matisyo Kohen Gadol. So maybe the fact that he was a Kohen Gadol adds to the Hashem not. First, he says it in a general way, Chashmonai, the Chashmonaim itself, and then he adds to it Matisyo Kohen Gadol. That adds to the Lo Ga'altim. I'm just thinking maybe that's what it means. Further, it says L'chaloisom. So here the L'chaloisom fits the previous one. L'chaloisom before, with this one, Bimei Haman. How did Hashem protect us b'mei Haman? So he says, Shemaditu lahem Mordechai ve'Esther, because Hashem stood up for them, Mordechai and Esther. So that was the way that Hashem protected us then. And b'chachmei doiros. No. That was there. Lahofer brisi itom. This fits also. But before, this is b'mei parsim, in the days of the Persians. This is talking about Shamadit lahem, shal beis Rebbe v'chachmei doiros. That is referring to the home of Rebbe. It's Rabbi Yehuda Nossi and the sages of the generations. And further it says, Kani Hashem Elikeihem is Lashon Loved, Gog Magog, he says. She'ein kol umma v'loshin yichol lishnu b'hem. No nation, no tongue, no language, no nation can dominate them. What does it mean, dominate them? Means, fully dominate them. You have Yidden being persecuted throughout their history, but dominating what he calls here fully, that's Ani Hashem Elokeim. I am God, their God, and no other nation can dominate them. Rabbi Levi Omar Mehocha. So he started off his drasha from here also. So this is going back like Shmuel. There's one more. This is Rabbi Levi. So he started off from here, this pasuk. Over there, the pasuk in Bamidbar 33:55 says like this: if you will not chase out the inhabitants of the land, from before you, you don't kick them out, you allow them to stay. So those that you leave from them will become they will be poking your eyes and there will be thorns in your sides. In other words, you're going to have tsaros from them. If you allow these people to stay there, to be there, and to be part of it, you're going to end up suffering from them. We know quite well what's going on in Israel now, for all the people that are around there, all the trouble that we're having. And it says, "V'tzoreru eschem ala oretz ata Hashem yeshim ba." They will cause you trouble on the lands that you're sitting. This is what the pasuk says. He's going to say the trouble we have is from Haman, the rest of them. What he's saying, the pasuk says, if you don't chase out the inhabitants of the land. So what does it got to do with the Megilah? What does it got to do with Haman? Because we find a similar story by Shaul and Amalek. The Navi, Shmuel Hanavi sent Shaul on a mission to wipe out the Amalek. But Shaul felt bad for the sheep, the thing he wanted to bring. He didn't listen to Hashem. He followed his own understanding. He thought it was better off bringing an offering to Hashem. So what happened? Then, because he didn't kill them all, it says that they turned themselves through sorcery to the animals. And then we have an Amalek, who is the grandfather from Haman, the great-grandfather. So because he says, Hashem tells you here, if you're not going to love, you're going to suffer from them. So the same thing is, you see, those who didn't listen and they kept some of the Amalekim, they felt bad. So what happened? You have the trouble. Now we have Haman, who comes from Amalek, who causes all the trouble. Of Elun Enshu, the two were punished. Al Shechamal, Shaul al Amalek, because Shaul had compassion. He didn't listen. Hashem says, chase him away. He had compassion. And therefore, we have tsuras for that. So that means you have to listen to Hashem's instructions. You can't say, I know better than Hashem. I'm going to do what I feel is right. You have to listen, as the Navi says to King Shaul. It's better to listen to Hashem than bringing the best offering. I said, no, I'm not going to kill the animal. I'm going to bring it an offering to the Mizbeach. No. Listen to it. Next. Chia said from this verse, it says in Midbar, Lamed Gimel Nun Zayin. So the first words reads like we say in the pasuk, "V'hoyo kasher demisi lasois lohem eselochem." As I had thought to do to them, I will also do to you. Which means that is in the pasuk. Trying to in the context over there. But what happened here is also that the Jewish people almost got destroyed because Haman decreed that they should all die. He made the gezerah for all the Yidden. So here you see a fulfillment. The pasuk continues. If you don't chase them out, see, this is the pasuk nun hey. So before is if you don't chase them out, so then what I wanted to do to them, I'll do to you because you didn't get rid of them. So he says from here you see, as they too almost were destroyed. The Jewish people with the decree from Haman. So. Again, this tells us when Hashem says chase them out, don't leave them, you have to listen to Hashem. Again, this Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Levi and Shmuel, they're all started off to darshan. But this Vahibi Me'achashverish, Amarav, is already the psukim. So now we're going to continue with the psukim. So the Gemara says, Achash Verish. He expounds now the word Achash Verish. The word Achash Verish break up into two. Ach means a brother, and Rosh means like head. He's like a brother to the head. This is a reference, the Gemara says, Rav says, Ochiv Shel Rosh. He was like a brother to the one of the head. What does it mean, Ochiv Shel Rosh? What does it mean? He's a brother. Kolaimer to say Doimeloi. Basically, Achashverosh is similar to Nebuchadnezzar. We'll see. Rosh, the head of the evil is called Nebuchadnezzar. We'll see. So he is Ach Rosh. He's a brother to the Rosh. Achiv Shel, when he's a brother, he's just like him. And also Ben Giloi Shel Rosh. Ben Giloi means the same age. The age in this case means same like birthday. There is a certain time of year or month that you can tell what the person will be. When you say somebody is a Ben Giloi, same age, basically what you're trying to say, they have the same ideas in their head. They come up with the same idea. They have the same evil plans. So he was a brother. He was like Nebuchadnezzar, and he plotted like Nebuchadnezzar. Ben Giloi means Ben Mazoloi. He's the same constellation. There's a constellation for every time. So being born in the zodiac, the way it's various different, represents various different signs, But people that come up with the same evil plans, we call them Ben Giloy. They're the same kind. They were born in that same negative time frame. That's called a mazel. And so Shneim Deya Achas. It says Shneim Deya Achas Hoyo Lahem. They both had one opinion. The Gemara is going to explain. We call him the brother of Rosh. Who is Rosh? So he says, Achiv shel Nebuchadnezzar Harosha, Shenikra Rosh. He's the brother. He's similar to the evil Nebuchadnezzar, who is called Rosh. Where do we see that he is called Rosh? Shenemar, the pasuk in Daniel, Perik Beis, pasuk Lamed Ches. So over there, it says, he's giving him, he says to him, B'chol di dorin bei anosha. Anywhere would the people live. Chevas bora. And the animals of the wild. V'oif shemaya, this is Aramaic in Daniel. And the birds of the heaven. Yahav bidach, he's given in your hands. V'hashlotoch b'koloin, he made you dominant. He's saying to King Nebuchadnezzar, you're the dominant in everything. Antu Reisha di Dava. You are the head of the Dava. He calls him the Reish. Dava is usually gold. I'm not sure it means the word gold here. But basically, we see that he calls him Reish. You're the brother of Nebuchadnezzar Harosha. Shenikra Rosh. He's called Rosh. Shenamar, as the pasuk says, Ant hu Risho Didava. He calls him Reish. You're there, so he's Rosh. But he's also Ben Giloy Shel Rosh. He has the same attitude, the same bad mazel, like the Rosh, like Nebuchadnezzar. How do we see this? Who? Nebuchadnezzar Harag. He killed many of the Jews by the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash. And Haman, Bikesh Lareg, he seeked to kill. So in other words, he didn't, Hashem protected us, but he tried to kill. Who Hichriv, Nebuchadnezzar destroyed the first Beis Hamikdash. And who Bikesh Lahachriv? He wanted to destroy. He didn't destroy because we learn, Rashi brings down, besides the story of Haman that we're all familiar with the Megilah, there was a previous story. Rashi brings down that he was trying to stop the building of the Beis Hamikdash. So he says, Yisoid Sheyosat Zerubbabel beBeis Hamikdash, B'nei Kodesh. Zerubbabel, King Zerubbabel, he built the foundation for the second Beis Hamikdash in the days of Kodesh before Achashverosh. So they were in the process of building. K'moshe Amor b'Sefer Ezra, Siman Daled. So what does it say over there? And he said, he stopped. Shenemar, we see in the pasuk in Ezra, ubemalchus Achashverosh b'tchilas malchusei. During the kingdom of Achashverosh, who followed Kodesh was before Achashverosh. When the government of Achashverosh, in the beginning of his government, Kosnu Sitna al Yoshvei Yudi Yerushalayim. So again, Horag, this who is actually Achashverosh, not Haman. This is actually Achashverosh. We're not talking here about Haman. We're talking about Achashverosh. That's what we're talking about. But the point here is that Achashverosh tried to stop. He says, Kosvus Sitna. Sitna like Satan, like the Satan. Sitna means to block. Al Yoshvei Yehuda, Al Yoshvei Yerushalayim. And those who sit in Yehuda and Jerusalem, they wrote a slander on Yesh Yehudi Yerushalayim. So Rashi says, "Shenimna l'satan lahem." He was appointed to be a disturbance to them, a Satan to them. Shlo they shouldn't build it. So here you see that he had the same idea. That's why we call him Uben Gilei Shel Rosh. He had the same opinion as him. He destroyed, he wanted to destroy. He killed, he wanted to kill. I mean, Haman came up with a plan, but Achashverosh went along with it, so it's part of it. That's the way he interprets the word Achashverosh. Ach, Rosh. That's what the Rav says. Shmuel gives another interpretation. Shmuel says the words comes from, it has like the word, the ches and shin and the reish, which spells shachar, black. Chashverish has the word shin reish ches, shachar. So he says the reason he had the name of Achashverish, shahushcheru p'neim shel Yisrael b'yomov, because the Jewish faces during the days of Achashverish, kishulei kedera, like the bottom of the pot, which is burnt, and it was a pot that's at the bottom. So when you want to say something is really black, you say it's black like the bottom of the pot. And because he caused them so much sorrows, and that's why he gets the name of Achashverosh from the Lashon of Shachar. Rabbi Yochanan has a further interpretation. He says it's made of the word Och l'roshei, woe to his head. Kol shezoichrei, anytime you mention his name, Omar says Och, oi. Rashi says Och means oi, woe. Woe to his head. Another, they're all playing on the word Achashverosh, the word. Rabbi Chanina Omar, Rabbi Chanina said, Shahakol Naseh Roshim B'Yomo. This comes from the Lashon that they all became Rosh. Rosh means poor. Everybody became poor because we learn Shenemar, as the pasuk says in Esther, Vayosam Hamelech Chashverosh Mas. He put a tax on everybody. So that's why it was called Achashverosh. The word Rosh means poor, Rosh. The Rosh in Koil. That's what we get. All right. So the pasuk starts like this: Vahi b'mei Achashverosh, hu Achashverosh. So what does it mean? He is Achashverosh. It was in the days of Achashverosh. He is Achashverosh. Says Rashi, hu Achashverosh, who he is the same of Achashverosh. Hu berishoy mitchilosi v'ad sofer. He was evil starting from the beginning all the way to the end. Who is the same Achashverosh? Just like we said before, he tried to stop the building of the Beis HaMikdash. He stopped it. And he was, at the end, he was the same Russia. He tried to kill all the Jews. Find another similar language of who. It says over there, who Esav? He's Esav. Over there, the pasuk says Aluf Magdil, Aluf Iram, Eluf. Who Esav Avi Edom? He is Esav, the father of Edom. So, what does it mean? He's Esav. Same. Who Berosha? He is evil. Mitchilosav Atzefer, from the beginning and the end. In the beginning, it was a Rasha. He sold his Bechayra. He didn't care about Bechayra. And then at the end, he came to complain. He didn't want them to bury Yaakov. He says that he deserves the Maras Machpelah. Same thing we find in Bamidbar Chov Tes. So over there, the pasuk says, "Ubnei Eliyav goes Nemu Dasam Aviram." Who Dasam Aviram? Those are Dasam Aviram. Kriyeida Asher Hitzu Amish Valarim that instigated Moshe about Hashem when they instigated about Hashem. So again, it says he is Dasam Aviram. So what does it mean? Again, Hein Berishon Mitchilosam Vatzeifen. They were in their evil from the beginning and the end. In the very beginning, we find Moshe Rabbeinu saw there were two Jewish people fighting. Who are those two Jewish people? Dasam Aviram. Many years later, when he came in the Machloikis Korach in the desert, who is the one that joined the Machloikis Korach against Moshe Rabbeinu? That was Dasam Aviram. They were evil from the beginning to the end. We find another time, another case where the Torah uses the lashon of who in Divrei Yomim Beis Chav Beis. It says who Hamelech Ochos. Over there, the pasuk reads Ubeis Hotzer Loi. In the time when he got difficult, by Yosef Limel Hashem, so he continued to further violate, go against Hashem. Who Hamelech Ochos? He's King Ochos. I mean, he's the same king like it was there. He continued to be that way. From the beginning to the end, he remained the same Russia. In the beginning, he went against Hashem, and then at the end, he continued. Always against Hashem. Now, the Gemara says we find also in the positive. All these that we mentioned now are all Rishoyim. And we're saying that they started off with their evilness and they continue with evilness. But also we have in Divrei Yomim, Aleph, Perek Aleph. So with it, the pasuk says, Avram, who Avram? Avram is Avram. Why did it say Avram? I mean, the Pashat, it says there, Avram is Abraham with the hay. Avram, who Avram? But he says, Avram, Dr. Rashi, Pasuk of Divrei Yomim. There's a verse in Divrei Yomim. So what does it mean? Hu b'tzidkoi mitchilasei v'ad sofer. He was in his righteousness from the beginning through the end. He was 3 years old when he recognized Hashem. And then later on, Hashem says, I love him because he will instruct the family. So he was righteous from the beginning to the end. In Shmois Perigva Pasuk Chaf, again, the says, who Aaron and Moshe? That's Aaron and Moshe. What is who? Basically the same idea. Hein b'tzitkon, they are in the righteousness, mitchiloson v'ad sofen, from the beginning to the end. In Shmuel Aleph Perik Yudzayin Pasuk Yudalet, then it says v'David hu hakoten. David was the minor. He was the. So he says he was always humble. He was in his humility from the beginning all the way to the end. Kishem shebekatnusay hiktin atzmai. Just as in his youth, he made himself small. Those that were greater than him in Torah. So when he didn't know, he would always ask everybody. Even when he became already a king, David. He made himself small next to the people that are greater in wisdom. It's brought down that the world was going to flood, and Achitophel taught him how to put the shame to have the water subside. And that's why he called him Rabbi Alufi V'Idoy, my teacher. He held himself very small. So that's why we call him David Hu Akot. He is the minor. He was always humble, and he stayed humble that way. Further translating the Megilah, Hamoilech. So literally, if you would say, it should say, Vahi b'mei Achashverosh, Hu Achashverosh, Melech al Sheva Esim. says Hamelech. Melech seems to who kinged. In other words, that he became his own king. Omar Rav, says Rav, what it means is Shemolach me'atzmai. On his own, he became king. What does it mean on his own? Not on his own, it means Shemolach me'atzmai. Rashi says Shaloi hoyam ezara melucha. He wasn't fit. He wasn't really part of the seat of the government, so he wasn't really fit from that. So that either tells us something good about him, or it says us something bad about him. Amri lo l'shvach. Some people say that this is something to his praise. Amri lo l'gnai. Some people say it's to his shame. How so? Amri lo l'shvach. To see the praise, say, there was nobody else that was important to become a king like him. He wasn't even from the seed of the, and still they made him into a king. That's one interpretation. That, oh, look how great Achashverosh was. That notwithstanding that he wasn't from the seed of the government, they made him king. That means how great he was. Other people say, no. He wasn't really fit to be a king. He just gave them a lot of money. He paid him off to become the king. So that's why he stood up, he became a king. So whether the fact that he wasn't, well, what are we trying to say over here? We have two versions, two ways. Either the fact that it wasn't from the seat of the government tells us what a great person he was, and yet they picked him, or it tells us that he didn't really deserve, he just bought his way in. Then the pasuk says that he was a king from Hoidu Ba'ad Kush, from Hoidu to Kush. Two interpretations. Our Hoidu, normally we spend from Hoidu to Kush, from California till Boston, all the way. So they're far away places. And you're saying, well, he was the ruler all the ways, starting from California all the ways to Boston. So that would mean that Hoidu is on one part of the world, and Kush is on the other part of the world. And we're saying that he was ruled the whole entire world. So there is a disagreement between Rav and Shmuel. Chad Omar, one of them says that Hoidu b'soif ha'olam, that's Hoidu is in one end of the world, Kush b'soif ha'olam, and that means Hoidu b'at Kush. But the other one says no. Chad Omar Hoidu v'Kush. Actually, they were next to each other. So what's the big deal? If they're next to each other, we're saying he governed from Hoidu to Kush. What's the big deal? But we're trying to say, Kishem Shemolach al Hoidu v'Kush, just as you can see that you can be dominant of Hoidu and Kush because they're next to each other. Kach Molach, so he was able to dominate from one end of the world to the other end of the world. This is a very similar way. We have the same disagreement. Malachim Aleph, Perik Hey, Pasuk Dalet, says, he was dominating on the other side of the entire island of the Sivir. And it says, Mitifsach va'ad Aza. So Shlomo was dominant on the other side, Tifsach and Aza. We have the two opinions here, Rabbi Shmuel. So we're saying that he ruled from one edge of the world to the other side of the world. That they were together. Just like they're together, he was able to dominate Tifsach and Aza, kach molach al kol olam kuloi. So he dominated the whole world. that he ruled the whole other side of the river, just like Tifsach to us. Okay. Today, we have a very special day. It's actually the 19th and 20th day of Kislev. We actually don't say Tachanun, because this is called a Yom Tov, because this celebrates the release of the Frierdiker Rebbe from prison. Now, the Alter Rebbe expounded on the view of the Baal Shem Tov, and the Alter Rebbe was very much. I'm trying to get rid of the Gemara. We don't need anymore. Let's see, but what they have over there. I'm saying it to stop the share, and doesn't want to stop it. I'm not sure why. You there? Oh, here we go. Sorry about that. I don't know. For some reason, I didn't want to stop the share. But in any event, we celebrate it. We say Agud Yom Tov. We call it the Rosh Hashanah for Hasidus. Now, there's a long story told about the Alter Rebbe. And Alter Rebbe was the one student of the Magid. It was the time the Alter Rebbe was a young man. He was 18 years old. He was already knowledgeable, exceptionally. He was proficient in all parts of the Torah, and he had a phenomenal skill, memory. He reviewed at the age of 16, I don't know, maybe 18 times already, the whole Talmud, Tried to do the Talmud once. It was just an outstanding scholar. And at that particular time, there were two possibilities. He wanted to go to a yeshiva, which there was a big yeshiva. So there was one in Vilna, which was headed by the Gaon Rabbi Eliyahu of Vilna. And there was the other one that was headed by the Maggid of Mezrich. And he heard that by the Vilna, it was mainly the Talmud, but by the Maggid, he also learned Hasidus, he learned Kabbalah. And he said he wants to try out. He knows how to learn a little bit, but he wants to try out and see what is this about this Hasidus. He wanted to try it out. And actually, in the beginning, he wasn't so impressed when he came there, but eventually the Maggid won him over. In matter of fact, the Alter Rebbe was a very young age. He came there at the age of 18. And he became one of the most important students, or the most important student of the Alter Rebbe, of the Maggid. There were many bigger students. The Maggid gave him the job to both author the Shulchan Aruch. You have the Shulchan Aruch Harav, which is his, that's the law that we have today, and the Shulchan Aruch. And he authored the Tanya, which is the basic book of the Hasidus. I said earlier, it's not a new Torah, it's the same Torah. God forbid. It's just an inspiration. It's the inner. It's just like a soul and a body. So we see the outside, but the body has a soul, has an inside, has an inner, has feelings, has something more than what meets the eye on the surface. So the Hasidus came and they wanted to reach in deeper than just the simple meaning of things, and to be able to see godliness in everything of the world, to experience Hashem in the world. And that was something that the Hasidus teaches, to look at things And even the negative things that come through the world, a lot of times we look at things in a bad way. And another Jew, sometimes we think bad of them. But if you look deeper and you find the Baal Shem Tov says that every Jew is like a Eretz Chayfetz, has a desire for Hashem. It's like a jewel, and there are a lot of hidden treasures in the ground, and you got to sort of dig it up. You have to dig up the treasure, and every year you have to find, and you have to do it. The Baal Shem Tov says, don't look at them just as the surface. Don't look what they look outside. Go inside deeper, and then you will find. And that was the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov that the Alter Rebbe expounded. But the Alter Rebbe also gave ways of understanding it. So it wasn't just, to believe it, but it was ways of understanding it. And this, we have a whole Hasidic philosophy and teaching and different parts. In the Tanya, in the very beginning, we're starting now, the Alter Rebbe tells us about the struggles that we have. Why do we have the struggles? Where did they come from? And how to deal with them? And to realize that if you're not perfect, you have struggles, that's part what Hashem wants. Hashem wants us to struggle. Hashem didn't create everybody to be a tzaddik, everybody to be righteous. And as Rebbe says, he says, there are different foods. Some are sweet and some are bitter, and then you prepare them well, you make them very tasty. They become really, same thing is, some people do the right thing all the times. Some people make little mistakes, and then they sort of get back and become sweeter. And it actually becomes very, very, very tasty. Then he says that one has to realize there are special people, tzaddikim, that can only do, don't have any temptations, are not challenged. They only love Hashem and they only want to do good and do mitzvahs. Those are few and far in between. The ordinary person has challenges, but the key is one's mind dominates the heart. You have the ability, we all have the ability to go ahead and stay strong. We just gotta choose to do that. If we want to do that, nobody can say they can't. We all could. Okay, we have a hard time. We have to struggle. We have to fight, but we all could. And that's what the Alter Rebbe was teaching it. Now, of course, to implement it and to do it is a whole nother level. But at least we know what the struggles are, and we know what is upon us and what we need to do. What we need to do is to take every day, one day at a time, and to realize that this is all Hashem wants us to do, is to service Him and to do for Hashem. The other thing is that the Rebbe was very strong in asking the Hasidim to treat everybody nicely, even their opponents, even the people that did terrible things to them. And, one would expect that, you want to retaliate, some of the Misnagdim did terrible things to the Hasidim. But the Rebbe actually says, when God does a kindness to you, when God saved you, you have to become more humble. You have to become more accepting. You have to become more to reach out. The Rebbe says, perhaps if you keep on reaching out, you don't respond to them in kind, maybe you can turn their hearts around. Maybe eventually they'll come back. Maybe you'll be able to gain their love in the return. The Alter Rebbe had some criticism from his own colleagues. Some of them weren't happy that he's teaching such hidden stuff to the public, and sometimes some pages of the writings were laying around disrespectful over there on the floor. So one of the rabbis says, look, the teaching of our Rebbe is on the floor. Why? Says this. So he gave him a mashal, about the Alter Rebbe. He says, it was once a son of a king who was not feeling well, and they couldn't save him. The only thing that would save him is to take the precious stone, which was on the crown, crush it, and try to give a little bit of that medicine. He couldn't open his mouth. Maybe a lot of it will drip on the side. Maybe we'll get a drop. Maybe we'll be safe. Same thing is with Hasidus. Some of it gets wasted and spilled, goes to a place, but maybe one drop will hit the point. It'll accomplish what it needs to accomplish. So we see what the Alter Rebbe has accomplished, created this movement. Chabad moved to the city by the second Rebbe to Lubavitch, which is known for its Lubavitch in Russian is love, brotherly love. And that's the idea, to not be judgmental and to accept everybody. Nobody's too far, but to see the inside, look deeper, and don't just look at the surface. And hopefully that as we celebrate Yutas Kislev, their redemption will be able to celebrate the redemption of Klal Yisrael with the Geula Hamitis Vashlim, the true redemption with Mashiach Tzidkenu. That concludes our shir for today. Anybody want to comment, say something? Nobody? So clear.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me. See everybody, Mitzvah Shem. Next week, we'll continue.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Everybody have a great week.
Thank you.
A great week. Thank you.
Bye-bye.